Well, hello there, and welcome to episode 117. This is Angela Noel, and thank you so much for listening to the Reclaim Your Fire podcast. If you've been listening for the last few months or so, you'll know that I have been doing a healing series for the podcast, and specifically, I've been bringing on some really incredible guests that have been sharing not just their story, but their story of healing and how they healed from their certain situations. And in this episode, I have another guest who's actually a comeback guest. I'm so excited because what we realized after recording her first episode, which was episode 110, we realized, oh my goodness, we had so much more to talk about. And in this episode, Jennifer Waters and I talk and really dive into healing, but doing it in very, very small, attainable steps. Because what we were realizing is that sometimes people get overwhelmed by the idea of healing from their certain situation. And maybe they try to do a few things and it doesn't work and then they give up. So we actually touch upon that issue about what you do when you try so many things and it just doesn't work for you. And really with our intention to make healing super, super easy, because what we really want for you is to know that you can heal, and you can heal at any time from anything, anywhere, no matter what you're healing from. And if you are new to this podcast, and this is the first episode you're listening to, you definitely want to go back starting at episode 107 when I started the healing series, and just start listening from there, because there are a combination of guest speakers and episodes that I just do alone where we talk candidly about healing. And if it's one thing that I know for sure, is that the world needs to heal, and it starts with healing ourselves first. So without further ado, please listen to my very, very informative, enlightening, and expansive conversation with my soul sister, Jennifer Waters. Hello, fire goddesses. Welcome to the Reclaim Your Fire podcast. My name is Angela Noel, and I am a prosperity coach for the newly awakened, or awake curious, driven overachiever, and overdoer. After running a successful acupuncture practice in Boston for 12 years, I decided to hang my hat by closing the practice and pursue what it is that I'm really meant to do in this world, and that is to serve humanity online on a global scale. Using my background in Chinese medicine, along with the brain science of habits, spirituality, and divine masculine and feminine energy balance, I am here to help you not just understand, but know how powerful you are, and that you are the person who is responsible for having the finances, inner peace, radiant health, and energy, aka the fire, in your life that you've always desired. My intention with this podcast is to serve humanity, no matter what gender you identify as, to help bring out the divine feminine goddess in each and every one of you. As you probably are already aware, the world is changing and is begging for the goddess to come out in each and every one of you. So, fire goddesses, stay tuned. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Reclaim Your Fire podcast. This is Angela Noel, and I am the host of this podcast. And guess what? I have another interview today to continue on with the healing series, and it's actually a comeback guest. My dear sister, Jennifer Waters, is here. We're going to continue the conversation on healing. Jen, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me back.
I'm so excited to see you again. And I'm really excited for our conversation because we talked off camera before we pressed record, and I think we have a really good one for everybody today.
I'm excited.
Me too. Me too. So we are talking about healing. And in the last time we met, we discussed healing from grief. And you shared your story about healing from grief when it came to your dogs, losing your dogs pretty quickly. And also just we touched on death a little bit too, which I feel like is a really important topic to touch upon. But today we were talking about what we were going to talk about. And it was basically, we realized that some people understand the importance of healing, but the idea of doing it might just feel insurmountable. Like, how would I ever do that? How would I ever be like Jen? That just feels like, Jen, maybe Jen is born with it, or, maybe she has some special power that I don't have. Like, it must be nice. So we decided it would be really nice to offer an episode where we could just break it down and chat about that.
The how of healing.
Like the how of
How do you
healing.
get there? How do you do it?
How do you get there when it feels like, how could I ever do it? Because, you hear that a lot where somebody goes through this like tragedy that you could never imagine, losing a child or losing like 5 relatives in a month or something. How do they do it? How do they do it? And no matter what your situation is, I feel like what we're going to talk about today can be applied to any kind of healing situation.
Well, and I think that that's where this really came from because, you and I have talked about how recently I've been talking about how I lost so many dogs so quickly, and came through it, but there are so many other different times in my life when I've had to heal from really intense situations. And I really sat and reflected on what did I do differently or what did I do the same in each of those situations? And there was no magic answer in any of them. There was no magic bullet, there was no magic program, but there was a thing that I did in common each time. And in that, I feel that I'm not welcoming it, but death doesn't scare me. Loss doesn't scare me. Relationships ending don't scare me anymore because I know that I have the lived experience of being able to heal multiple times. And I know that I can do it again. And when I look back, I wanted to know, what is it? How did I do that? And how can I share that with people? Because there are still, even, I can sit here and say that I'm not scared of death, but I still will feel grief. When people lose, I'm not, heartless. I do still have emotions, but I understand the grief process and I know how to, go into it and get out of it. And, I recognize that even through all the experience that I've had I lost 5 dogs within 2 years and 3 of them all died within 6 months of each other. And so it was just one after another of going through grief and coming out of it. And in each of those episodes, in each of those moments, there was this moment where in the grief, like grief is just going to do what it does to you, right? You can't get out of that. You have to kind of go through it. But in each one of those moments, there was this time where I felt like I would never come out of this grief. Even though I had been through it so many times before, there was always a time, and I believe that there will be in, all the future times to come, where it feels so deep, it feels so dark. And I really truly believed in that moment that I wasn't going to come out of it this time. And I want people to understand that even people who are talking to you about healing and can show that they have, done it, or they're talking about, how to do it, or that they've come through these things, even those people are experiencing, emotions. And they can be as dark as that moment in the grief where it feels like I'm never going to come out of it. But what I recognize after having been through it so many times and just kind of being a person who naturally observes and just I want to understand things. I want to know the why of things. And so I recognize that I felt that every time. And, to me, that gives me comfort because it's like, I know now what that process is. And I'm not any better at it than anybody else. Wasn't born with anything special. I don't have a magic program, but I understand the process and I know the things that I've done, and they're small little choices and changes that anybody can do. And that's what I want to share today is those small little choices, those small baby steps. Really, like, I've always been a big proponent of baby steps in anything because trying to make any improvement in your life can feel overwhelming. It doesn't matter what you're talking about. If you're
Mm-hmm.
talking about fitness or food or starting a business or getting yourself out of anxiety or depression or picking yourself up after divorce, it doesn't matter. Like, it can feel big, it can feel huge. And I've always been a big proponent of the baby steps, and that was no different when we talk about my multiple healing journeys. They came from baby steps. That's how I got to where I am today, because I took tiny little baby steps and I looked at what worked and I got rid of what didn't, and I just kept building one little baby step at a time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for those listening, we felt that it was really, really important to do this episode. For those of you that are out there, I know you're there, who are like, I could never do that. How will I ever recover? Like, you hear that all the time when you hear of a tragedy, like, I could never do what she did. I could never do what he did. So this episode is for you. And Jen, I can't wait to really dive in.
Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. So you had said, we had talked off the air about some of the things that we have personally gone through. Is it okay if I go there?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm an open book. Go for it, sisters.
Okay. So, well, in addition to the dogs, there has also been other sources of your grief. And it's never our intention, and it's never my intention on this show to really go into the story about how terrible it is, but how we got out of that, how we healed from that situation. So just really briefly, whatever you feel like sharing, what other things have you healed from in the past?
The you know the big story of my life was living for most of my life with physical, sexual, emotional, and mental abuse, and not knowing that I was being abused, not understanding that relationships could be any different than that. And so in that time, um, I wasn't really fully aware of how bad things were. I knew that, you know, I, I wanted my life to be better. I knew that I wanted out, but didn't really have a full comprehension of how bad things actually were, because I thought that's the way relationships were. I thought that's the way people treated you. And the bigger part of grief actually happened, or not grief, it was depression, it was PTSD, all the things, anxiety attacks. The bigger part of that happened when I actually got out and was safe. And in that moment, then I was able to realize how bad things had been. I had a lot of people helping me to see how bad things had been. And the part that was the hardest was understanding that I had allowed myself, I had gotten myself into this situation where I was such a victim of abuse. And I had thought of myself as a very intelligent, independent, strong woman, and I had no idea that I was being so manipulated, so controlled, so abused. And so that really shook my identity to the core. I felt like, not only did my relationship end, but I didn't know who I was anymore, because I thought that I was this strong, independent, intelligent woman. But if I was that, how did I let myself be in a relationship that was so toxic, that was so damaging, that was so traumatic? Um, and so that was, I mean, it was like, I told you recently that was when I had my crash. That's what I call it. I literally couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't I couldn't complete sentences. I couldn't have conversations with clients. And for somebody who thought of herself as a strong, independent, intelligent woman, I was running my own business. To not be able to even make it to the mailbox and back, that was really like life shattering for me. And I gave myself 1 week at that point. And I was like, okay, rest. You can't complete sentences. You can't find words. You can't finish these emails. Rest. You have 1 week and then get back on it. And it took me 6 months to come back from that. And that was my first real experience with, needing to heal, just the depths of grief, depression, anxiety. PTSD started happening, and I wasn't even aware that I'm not a veteran. I haven't been in a war zone. I wasn't even aware that a person could have that. But trauma is all over the place, and it can come from all sorts of different situations that I think we're now starting to recognize. And luckily, people are able to get more help for that. But that was, my first experience there. And we can talk a little bit about, that's where I kind of talked about the very, in that darkest, that crash, like where I was barely even able to function. I remember the first baby step, if you want to go there, the first baby step that I took to healing.
Yeah. I just want to acknowledge you first for sharing what you shared, because I know that it was a journey for you and is a journey for you. And of course, we want to focus on the healing aspect, but I also want to acknowledge that you shared that, because I know that abuse is rampant. And like what you shared, a lot of people don't even recognize abuse. And it's my intention, yes, to bring awareness, but more importantly, to focus on the healing. So thank you so much, sister, for sharing that. I really appreciate you for doing that.
Yeah. There was a time I wouldn't have been able to do that, but
which speaks to your healing. Like
you can't, that is from the healing. I wasn't able to speak to it. It was so painful. It was so dark, when I was still, unhealed from it. And the closer I get to healed, the easier it is to talk about.
Yeah. And I feel like what you shared, the grief, the depression, the PTSD, the anxiety, a lot of people don't even know that they have trauma. Like I remember, and we'll get to the healing shortly, but I remember I offered after the Boston bombings, I opened my clinic up to people who felt that they were dealing with a trauma, and no one showed up, because they're like, well, I'm going to save that for people who actually had trauma. Like it didn't affect me. It was those people, those people that lost legs and arms and lost loved ones. And so I just want to bring light to the idea that, I feel very, very called to start talking openly about this, that trauma is trauma, no matter if it's capital T or little t, so that we can acknowledge it and then start to heal. So speaking of healing, what would you say after you realized that this was what it was, trauma? What were some of your first baby steps to healing?
So the first thing that happened is that I lost my health insurance.
Oh.
So, which actually was like a real blessing. It didn't feel like it at the time, but as I realized that I was not functioning in the world, that I had all these, I had never had anxiety attacks before, and then all of a sudden I was having them. It literally felt like my bones were breaking, when I went out in public. And one of the first things that happened was that I lost my health insurance. And so what that did for me, though, is that I suddenly had to start researching alternative ideas for healing. So I no longer could afford, I wasn't in a situation where I could afford Western healthcare without health insurance. So I started researching on my own. Okay, well, what are foods that I can use to, boost my serotonin, or what are practices that I can do to make me feel better, or to calm down my mind, or, heal from anxiety, breathing techniques, things like that. I just started researching, and I had no experience in any of those whatsoever. I was very science based. I was very Western healthcare based. And this is not, I have no say or even no feedback, about Western medicine. That's not what this is about. It's just that I didn't have access to that. And so I had to start looking for other steps. And they were small steps. Because obviously I couldn't just jump right into being a Chinese medicine expert. That doesn't happen overnight. So what happened for me is that I just started researching, or Googling like ways to feel better, ways to heal from depression, um, natural ways to feel better. And I found small practices. And I remember the first one that I tried was a gratitude practice. And I had no expectation that it would work, but I want to share with you what it looked like, because I think sometimes we hear gratitude practice and it's like, oh my God, I don't have 30 minutes to sit around and be grateful for everything that happened in my life. That's not what it looked like at all. What it looked like was that I would go for walks in the woods with my dogs, and there would come this, we would kind of come out of the woods at one point, and the sun would be shining. And that sun touching my skin felt so good. And sometimes the breeze would also be blowing, and the breeze touching my skin would feel so good that for a moment I would just stop and I would just be thankful for that.
Mm.
That was the best feeling thing that was happening in all of my days at that point. Just a little bit of sun on my face, a little bit of breeze on my face. And that felt like all I really had to be grateful for. Now, obviously, I had more to be grateful for. I was breathing, I was walking my dogs, I had access to nature. But in that time, in that moment, I couldn't really recognize all of that. And so I started this small practice of just being thankful just for a few moments, for the sun and the breeze when it touched my skin. And what I found was that in those small moments, I felt better.
Mm.
And I wasn't all the way there. I wasn't all the way healed. I had years to go, really. But in that moment, I felt better, and I was committed to feeling better. And so I committed to taking those small moments that I was creating and then just keep creating them and keep having them add up until eventually, over time, I mean, we're talking a space of years, but eventually over time, those small moments might have just been, a few seconds of my day. And I've now strung together so many beautiful moments in each day that I just, I told you how annoying I was last Monday. I woke up and I was like, it's Monday. I was so excited. And I instantly recognized how annoying that makes me as a person. But that's the truth of how I feel. Like, just, excited to get out of bed, excited to get going. And I want to paint that picture of where I came from. I was hiding in the corner, afraid of death, and I didn't know why, but the trauma in my body was so bad that my heart was beating, racing, my skin was just beet red, I was breathing hard, and I was literally facing a corner because that was the only place that I felt safe, and nobody was attacking me. There was no reason for me to feel that unsafe, but the anxiety and the PTSD just took me, it was taking me to these places that I didn't understand. And I came from there, and I got, to this point of where I'm just excited for life. I'm not afraid of anything that will hurt me anymore. And I did it through baby steps like that.
I really appreciate that. And I think that a lot of people, you were mentioning the feeling you were like that annoying person. And I think a lot of people feel triggered by that because they believe deep down that they can never have that level of happiness. And truthfully, you may or may not believe it, audience, people listening, but that is possible for every single one of us. That's actually our natural state of being, because we are sovereign. We are sovereign beings, and we are meant to be joyful. And to your point, what is it with, you can't have gratitude and you can't have anger in the same, like they can't exist together,
Mm-hmm.
because
And
go ahead.
yeah, and even if it's just for 1 second,
Yeah.
if you created 1 second of gratitude in your life, that's one more second than you had previously. And so
Yeah.
and it was just that tiny moment that I created, and I didn't know what I was creating. I was just trying something. And this, gratitude is not what took me all the way to healing, but this is like that. I remember the very first example. That's where I started from. But I just noticed, I was like, oh, that felt really nice for that 1 second.
Yeah.
It felt good, and I forgot everything else. And then I went right back in to the wallow. That's what I called it, because I was wallowing in all the stuff that I
Hmm.
didn't know how to deal with. I didn't know how to process it. I didn't know how to heal from it. um, I went right back into that. But
Yeah.
then, there was this pull to get out of it, and to just like, oh, if I could create one more second of, happiness, of like feeling that sun on my face or the breeze. And I became maybe addicted, I don't know, but I just became very committed, at least, to finding more ways to do that, finding more practices to help me do that. And I think my whole journey since then, that was about 7 years ago, I think my whole journey since then has just been like really um, fascinated with ways to heal, and just ways to keep getting better, because it's exactly what you said. We all are capable of that, but it is a choice. That's one thing that I've really noticed when I've been talking about grief. It is so hard for some people, for all people, to lose their dogs. I guess not all, but the people who really love their dogs and feel the grief about their dogs, it is very difficult to lose a dog. They love us unconditionally. They're with us all the time. We care for them completely. And they just don't live long enough. And so, the loss of a pet is really difficult. And a lot of people just have had a hard time. They can't even talk about it.
Hmm.
And, the thing is that it's a choice to not want to talk about it. It's a choice to want to stay in that grief. And that's a hard thing to hear,
Hmm.
but it is a choice to not heal from any type of pain that you're feeling. You do have that choice. We all have that choice. You can choose for 1 second to be in joy about something, or to be in gratitude, to be grateful for the life of your pet, to be grateful that you knew your pet, like just for a couple seconds, to get out of that grief, that depression, and choose something higher, even if it only lasts for a second or a moment, or a minute or two. But it's a choice to stay in that. It's also a choice to get out of it,
Yeah.
and neither one is a magic bullet. Just to choose to get out of it, it's not going to take you all the way there, but it's a string of small choices, day after day after day, committing to that practice of just making small choices and choosing a higher thought, a higher emotion, a happier activity, something. And that's, I mean, when I look back at my healing journey, that's been the answer. That's what it's been, is just me stringing along those small wins to get to the point that I am today.
I love that. And also just like thinking about how when we're born, like babies are born, they're not born feeling sorry for themselves. I don't think so. I don't think they're born that
No.
way. I think they're born happy in general. I mean, when they're not happy, it's because they actually have like a life or death physical need, right?
Mm-hmm.
Feed me, change my diaper. But it's the feeling sorry for ourselves and being in choosing to stay in the lower vibrational emotions such as grief and anger and sadness. Yes, that is part of the spectrum of human emotion, but like you said, it's a choice and it's learned.
Mm-hmm.
We learn that
It's
as
demonstrated.
children. It's
Yeah,
demonstrated.
it's demonstrated by society, by those around us. A lot of us don't even
Exactly.
know that we have a choice. I mean, that's, I think,
Yes.
and maybe this is triggering for some people to hear, like, what? What do you mean I have a choice to get out of the grief of losing my pet or losing a relationship? Who are you?
Hmm. Yeah.
Because that's not what's demonstrated for us as
No.
we're growing up. We're shown that, oh, hard things happen. Doesn't that suck? Let's commiserate about it. Misery loves company.
Right.
That's the kind of stuff that we're demonstrated, that we're shown, that, that is demonstrated to us about how to handle grief and, depression and everything else. Life sucks.
Yeah.
Life sucks, right? Like, no, actually, that's a choice. Sucky things happen, yes. Like I
Yeah.
said, I will, the next dog that I lose, it will hurt just as much as all the others. Like there's just not, I'm not at that point where it doesn't hurt. It's going to hurt just as bad, but that doesn't mean that all of life sucks. That doesn't mean that I'm going to stay there. I'm going to feel it and I'm going to honor it and I'm going to process it. And then I'm going to choose to move out of it and move on for the next dog that I get to love, or the next relationship that I get to be in. I'm not going to stay in that place where things hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my choice. And that's, if I can do it, anybody can do it.
If you can do it, anybody can do it. And all of you who are listening, you are capable to make those choices too. And you had said something, Jen, earlier about practice. So, as humans, oftentimes it's, tempting to take the path of least resistance of what we've learned, right? We tend to learn from society and the news and, the catastrophe of life that it's more acceptable to be in our shit. But what we're saying today is it's like what you just said, it's a choice and also a practice. Just like you wouldn't expect, you had said something about Chinese medicine. You wouldn't expect to sit in front of a piano and know how to play without having any experience. So this too is a practice, and it requires discipline and commitment, just like any other practice, if you want to get good at it. So I really appreciate that you shared that. And so we talked about the building, kind of like, I'm thinking this is like the building blocks, right? Because we said this 7 years ago, this happened, right? So what did you do? What did you do next? What would you
Well, I
say?
think, to follow on what you just said too, that, it's a practice and it's a learning, and it's also fair to try things that other people, like, try things that you hear here today, try things that you hear from other people you follow, but also accept that they might not work for you, and that's okay. That doesn't mean that you're destined to stay in the wallow forever.
Right.
But that might not work for you. I tried a lot of things that didn't work for me, and then I just went on to the next one. And the thing is, I tried such small steps that it didn't take too much, for me to try it and then be like, no. Tapping is a thing that has never worked for me. I don't understand it. It doesn't work. I think that my skin is so sensitive that it actually just bothers me. So it's fine to hear that, tapping is the solution to all of life's problems. But if it doesn't work for you, that's okay. Move on. There's so much more. I mean, I think that was the blessing in me not having health insurance, was that the whole world was open to me as far as healing practices. I left nothing out. If it was indigenous wisdom or ancient wisdom or natural foods or, spiritual woo, um, or, supplements that were on the market, like it, I was willing to try any of it. And I found what worked for me. And there is nobody out there who can tell me what I know now, because I also bought all the programs and paid
Yeah.
all the coaches. So I also did that too. Fair, full
So did
disclosure.
I.
And there is no person out there who had the magic answer for me.
Right.
I'm the only person who had the answer for me to my healing. And the only way that I could find it was by trying things that worked for me, and then having the courage to say, thank you, coach. That didn't work for me. I'm going to move on. I'm going to find something else that does work for me.
Can we talk about that really briefly, actually, because some people who are maybe caught up in external validation and I mean, I understand, I was like that too, or following the experts, following the science, la 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 la. How do these people know? How are they going to know whether it's good for them or not?
How is the person who's trying it? How's the person who's being coached?
Yeah, how it say, like you were just talking, they're trying what you recommended. I'm going to try different things. Maybe people just don't have the confidence yet. They're not there yet.
It was interesting because my brain went somewhere else when you asked that question. I thought you were asking, how does the coach know what's going to work for the person that they're coaching? Or and what I experienced was that, and understand this, that coaches are wonderful. I wouldn't be here without them. And I'm not knocking them at all, but understand that they are coming from their lived experience. Just like I can only tell you the things that worked for me
Mm-hmm.
and coming from my experience, the coaches that I hired, and worked with, they can only share what they have experienced as well. And it was really interesting to see that some of them came from, this is the thing that works. Well, because it worked for them.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that it's going to work for everybody else. So, I would say for one, go into a coaching relationship
Right.
knowing that they don't have all the answers. Nobody has all the answers. And I
No
know
human
sometimes,
being has all the
yeah, I know sometimes we want to believe that, and we want to give our money and just, receive that magic answer, but it doesn't exist out there, not for all people, not for all, situations. And so just know that, go into that coaching relationship knowing that they're going to share with you what worked for them, but that doesn't mean it's going to work for everybody. So just have that knowingness, when you go into it. And then, if you have hired a really good coach and they're, sharing things with you that are wonderful but don't necessarily work for you, they're going to be okay with the idea that you are ready to move on. If you want to, like, if you get to that point where it's like, this isn't working for me or I need to move on, a really good coach will be okay with that. A coach who, has some healing work to do on their own, they're going to want to cling to you and hang on to you, and
Right.
it's going to mean something personal about them if you want to move on, and that's a sign right there to go, okay, well, that person, has some healing to do as well too. So don't give your power away to people who are in these positions of authority, because none of them have all the answers. You are the only one who's going to know what works for you. I cannot sit here and tell you that a gratitude practice is going to work for you.
That's
it,
right.
it just it just it will for some, and it won't for others. I can't tell you that meditation is going to work for you. I can't tell you that herbal remedies are going to work for you. You need to try those things. Reach out for the things that interest you, and that feel doable. If it doesn't feel doable, don't do it. It's not going to get you all the way there. So find the things that feel doable, that you can commit to, that make you feel a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
And just keep building on that, keep going. There's a specific practice I want to make sure to mention,
Yeah.
if we can segue into that.
Sure.
And that was the idea of, because this is really broad and it can be applied in a lot of different ways, and that was the idea of anchoring. And so for me, um, I started to notice a lot of repeating numbers just kind of in my life. And at the time, I didn't really know what that meant, in the spiritual world, that those are, messages from, the universe and your spirit guides. But at the time, I had no awareness of that. And so to me, all I just noticed was that I kept seeing 111 or 222. And I thought it was interesting. And so what I started to do is that I was seeing 111 so many times during a day that I said to myself, okay, when I see the number 111, I'm going to use that as an anchor, and I'm going to remind myself, almost like setting a reminder in your phone, kind of. But I'm going to remind myself to check your thoughts. That was what I kept saying to myself. So if I saw a 111 on a license plate or the time, that was a trigger to me to remember to think, check your thoughts. And then I would check my thought. What am I thinking about in that moment? Am I sad? Am I replaying something that happened in the past that's, no longer even occurring, but I'm still like dwelling in that negative emotion of it? Am I thinking about something happy, something positive, something that I want for the future? What was my thought in that moment? And then whatever it was, I tried to take it a little bit higher. So in that moment where I was checking my thought, if it was something negative, I would try and switch it, even for just a moment, to something positive. And, for me, obviously, gratitude worked really well. But this is something that can apply. It doesn't have to be repeating numbers, but I love this idea of anchoring. Maybe it is a reminder in your phone that just says, check your thoughts, and you do it 5 times a day. Well, that's 5 times a day that you have an opportunity to stop, check your thought, see what it is, that builds awareness in your own thoughts and like where your own thoughts go, because otherwise they're just kind of a runaway train that, we don't really have control over unless we get really conscious about it. And then you have that chance to make a choice to choose a higher thought just for a moment, and if it's 5 times more than the day before, then you're already on your way to healing.
Yes. Yeah, you're on your way to success. And for people, I've worked with people over the years who say, I just can't meditate. And I feel that what you just described, Jen, is a form of meditation, because all meditation really is having awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe some people would argue that that's part of meditation, but having awareness of what your brain is doing, because otherwise it's like the busy monkey or the monkey mind, where all of a sudden 5 minutes later or 10 minutes later you're lost deep in thought and you have no idea how you got there. So it's just about creating awareness. So I love that that idea of anchoring. I know there's Insight Timer. Are you familiar with that app? And you can install it on your laptop. So if you're working, you can schedule reminders. I think there's other apps too that do this, but
Yeah.
Insight Timer will ring a bell that sounds like, I think you can pick the gong, or if you want a gong, or if you want a singing bowl or something, and that will provide you a reminder to be more mindful or stop what you're doing and watch your thoughts. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, whatever it is that works for you. For me, it was just check your thoughts. That was what I told myself. And I think to your point about, meditation being awareness, like I really, as you were saying that, I was like, I really think that healing is really just about awareness. It's about being aware of what you're stuck in, what you're feeling, what you're experiencing, and then just being aware that it is a choice to get out of it. It doesn't mean that it's going to happen right away. It doesn't mean that you're going to do it perfectly. It doesn't mean that it's even going to be easy. And it doesn't mean that it's not going to happen again, but you do have a choice to just go a little bit higher and a little bit higher and a little bit higher and pull yourself out of that valley. I used to say I was like face down on the floor. Like that's how I felt, was I was just face down on the floor. Like that was my state of being at that point. That's how well I was functioning. But, little by little, I picked myself up off the floor and I was able to function again. And that all came from, it really was the awareness, because I was in that state of researching and trying things and then discarding what didn't work. I became very aware of my own thoughts, my own feelings, my own, how did that work for me? I became very aware of that. And I do think that that was something that really helped me. And I think that because we're just not shown that, we're shown just kind of the life sucks mode, and, just bitch about it to your friends and they're going to bitch along with you. Um, I think that, if we could, the more aware we can become of our own thoughts and our own choices, the higher we're going to go.
and I'm so glad that you brought that so beautifully. You kind of circled us back to what we were talking about earlier by using the word awareness, because I want to stress the importance of, when trying new things to help you get out of a lower vibrational state, or your grief or your sorrow or your sadness or anger, awareness is really important for people who are like, how am I going to know if this is good or bad for me? Awareness to how it makes you feel.
Mm-hmm.
There's just, it's a muscle. Like, there's this pang in me that's just saying that this coach, for example, there's something about this coach that's just, I just don't know. She's pressuring me, or I'm feeling palpitations when I think about her, or whatever. Or
Mm-hmm.
this food is just not agreeing with me, even though it's supposed to be healthy and all my friends love it. All my friends are doing magic bullet coffee or whatever, but it gives me diarrhea. So I'm not going to, so it's about, how does it make you feel? We are not one size fits all. We're all different. We're uniquely beautiful, and we're sovereign. And we have we have that innate wisdom built within us to know. And somebody said this recently in a forum, that we're both in, a program that we're both in, that might even be the way of the future. And that's kind of off topic, is there will be no more experts, because we are our own expert. And I just gave me chills,
Yeah. And that's, I mean, oh, I resonate with that so strongly, but that's not something that I could resonate with when I was flat on my face,
Yeah.
in the middle of my crash. I couldn't have looked at myself and thought that I was the expert on my own healing. I needed to turn to other people. I needed to turn to other ideas. And it's only now through just like intensive, like I said, just researching ideas and then testing them on. I love to test things on myself, and just see how they work. I don't like to talk about anything that I haven't tested on myself. And so, in that, and over a long period of time of giving my sovereignty, my expert status, my power over to other people who I thought knew better. I had some, it was just a learning process. Like I went into a weight loss program and I gained 15 pounds. Thanks, expert.
Thanks, expert. It didn't work for you,
Thanks, expert, for your high protein diet that, did not work for me. And I knew it wouldn't work for me. I sensed it all along, but I didn't have the power then. I didn't have the confidence to say, no, thank you. That, that is not a program that's going to work for me. I can't eat high protein. I'm not a bodybuilder. So I didn't have the confidence at that point, but now I do. And that's something that, and that's kind of where I didn't understand the idea that we have a choice about how we feel and what our thoughts are either. That wasn't something that I could comprehend when I was flat on my face. I was like, no, this stuff is clearly, I wouldn't choose to feel this way. Right? Like who would choose to feel this way? Face in the corner, like having a heart attack and thinking, I thought my hips were breaking when I went out in public. And I wouldn't choose to feel that way. But the truth is, we do have a choice to stay in that place and to not get better. We do have it. We can make a choice that for 1 second we can find something that works for us, and we can, for 1 second or 2 seconds be a little bit better than we were the moment before, and then find those things and keep building on them. But that's not something that I could have understood from where I started, but it is something that I deeply understand and deeply want to get that message to people, that you are the expert in your own healing. You can do this all by yourself if you want to, with nobody else if you want to, because if you listen to your own body, if you listen to your own intuition, your own thoughts, you can heal. It's going to be probably a lot easier if you allow people to help you, but you're still the expert. And if I can just convince one person to just have the confidence to reach out for something that feels really resonant for them, even if it's weird, even if it's tapping. It works for a lot of people. It didn't work for me. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. But to reach out for something that feels really good to you, and even if it's weird, and even if your partner doesn't agree with it, or even if your parents think like you're being strange or whatever, if you think it's going to work for you, give it a try. And just see if you can get a little bit better than you were yesterday. And then that's it. That's the journey right there. Build on that. Keep doing that.
Keep doing it. Keep doing it. And, it's like testing. You use that word testing, which I want to talk about testing, but it's a totally different subject. I think where I'm going with
yes.
But yeah, just testing out things. And over time, I know that it becomes a muscle. Like one of my favorite things that I still do before I go to sleep was one of the first things I did when I was depressed and anxious. And I would go to bed at night and say, what went well? And a lot of times in the beginning, I was like, I woke up today. That was the only thing I could think of. And then after that, it just builds, right? And it gets easier, and you start to see the blessings and everything, things start to open up. And
Yeah.
like you said, like baby steps, even if it's just 5 times out of your day where you have this awareness of feeling good.
Yeah.
That's success
That's
right there.
that's success right there, because you did that. You
Yeah,
created that for yourself. And if you did it 5 times in one day, you can do it 6 times tomorrow, and
exactly.
7 times the next day. And that's the journey right there. And it truly, I mean, if, I think we've hit this message home, but like, it doesn't matter how you get there, but that's the path, is just making a choice to, find things that work for you, making the choice to actually do those things, and then being aware when they work, and then building on those, and if you can do that,
Yeah,
you'll be telling other people how, about your healing story instead of
exactly.
your victim story. I never talk, I don't even, in fact, that's the reason why you asked me if I wanted to talk about it, because I don't talk about my victim story anymore. I don't talk about, like, I don't have any place in my life to talk about that anymore, because that's not who I am. It's so far gone, and I don't have any need to relive it, and be in that energy anymore. My story now is a healing story.
Mm-hmm. I love
And
that. Amen, sister. My story now is a healing story.
yes.
Like if more people could embody that, and that's why we're here
And
today.
know that it's possible. Yeah, know that it's possible, and it's possible for everybody.
It is.
I remember, this keeps coming up, so I feel like I need to say this, but there was a moment where I felt really low during all this. There were many moments. But I remember this one specific moment, and I just asked God, the universe, I don't know who I was asking. And I was just like, who am I? Like,
Mm.
I didn't even know who I was anymore. I just felt so lost. And I asked, who am I? And I actually received an answer. And the answer was, you are divine. And I stopped for a second. Yeah. And that, you just, like, it took your breath away a little bit. And I was like, wow, I'm divine. And then the voice kept going, and it said, just like everybody else. And I was like,
Mm.
oh, that was such a good
It's
lesson.
beautiful.
I'll never forget that, because not only, did I receive the lesson that I was divine, but we all are. It was like it lifted me up, and then it kind of brought me right back down to, like, you're divine, and but then, you know, you can do what anybody else
That's
on
right.
this planet can do, and everybody else on this planet can do what you can do.
And again, just going back to the normalcies of what we are shown, right? We
Hmm.
are shown that celebrities get put on pedestals, and people who are more successful than others must have something different than us because they have it and we don't. And I love that you shared that download, Jen,
Hmm.
that we all have it. We are all divine, and we're also unique in the gifts that we have too. Like, what are those gifts? What is it that you are here to bring to the world because you have that within you? It might be you're an artist or a songwriter, or you're just really, really good at math and you can help people with their accounting. Like, that's a gift.
Hmm.
So what is that, and what is it that makes you happy? Because some people are stuck in that, well, being an artist, for example, is not important. It absolutely is important.
Hmm.
So, and that's really in this podcast and in the work that I do, is to help people realize that about themselves. Whatever it is, it's beautiful.
Hmm. Yeah, find what makes you happy and do more of that.
Yeah. Okay, so speaking of testing, I understand you've been doing some testing, and I would love for you to share your project,
This
sister.
is a total 180 from what we were just talking about, but not actually, but not, because let's go back to how it
Related.
started. Yeah,
Yes.
it is related. I found what was happy, and I found what made me happy, and I did more of that. So This last winter, the winter of 2022 to 2023, in that 6 month period, which I'm in Upper Michigan, so yes, winter lasts that long. So it's fair for me to say that. I lost three dogs, one right after another. And typically, I am a person, I'm a dog health and wellness advocate. So I write about dog health and wellness, I research it. I was a pet photographer for 10 years. My life pretty much revolves, my identity was as a dog mom. I pretty much could talk dogs all day long. And then I went through this period of time where I lost three dogs so quickly. And one of the things that I really wasn't able to do during that time was talk about dogs. I couldn't write on my blog. I couldn't write the book that I was writing. I just wasn't able to do that. So, that's a good example too, that even though I really feel like I've, come a long way in my healing journey, things still hurt. And I still had to give myself grace. I didn't just power through it and be like, oh, well, just do it anyways. My body, well, I cried every time I tried to talk about dogs or write about dogs. So I stopped doing that because it wasn't making me happy. And well, that left me in a weird space though, because that was my career. But what I gave myself a little time and I was like, don't talk about dogs for right now. And I pulled out a candle making kit from my basement. And I thought, well, this will, it's the middle of the winter in Upper Michigan. This will be a good hobby. And I started making candles. And 6 months later, I have now launched a candle business, Dog
I just
Kind
love
Candle
it.
Company,
I love
because
it.
I loved it so much. And what happened
Oh.
is, I was in the midst of losing all my dogs, but for hours I was making these candles. I was melting wax and I was blending fragrances, and I was pouring them into jars, and I was playing with different jar vessels, and I found myself in flow. I did not set out to do that. I didn't know it was going to happen, but I found myself in flow. And then what would happen is I'd get done making a batch of candles, and then I would stop, I'd take a breath and kind of look at everything, and I was like, oh my goodness, I didn't think about my grief for the last hour or two. However long I was working on those candles, I was just in flow. I wasn't thinking about anything else. And so I was like, well, why don't I do more of that then? And so it became this process of I started, finding better and cleaner ingredients. I really went all in on finding very clean ingredients for, the dogs that I will have in the future, and for myself. And I did a lot of testing to make sure that the candles burned, and I got the results that I wanted, and eventually I took it out to the public, and it's just been
Hmm.
incredible. And it came from me just trying something. I didn't I didn't expect this to happen, but it came from me healing from grief. And now I have a whole new venture that I love doing, and the proceeds from it can now go back to, supporting animal welfare organizations, which I love too. So it like all ties everything in together that I, love in life.
And even though it does seem like a 180, you are absolutely right. This is what you just described, sister, is exactly what we were just talking about for the last 54 minutes. And it's just try something new. You never
Yeah.
know. And a lot of times, don't you find that, because we talk a lot, and it's just about following those nudges. Like sometimes it's just like, go take a shower, even though you don't normally take a shower at this time of day. It's go take a shower, and then I'll come out of the shower and then I'll have an idea for a podcast or a blog post or something.
Mhm.
So it's just about following those little nudges, because the universe is constantly in communication with us, and it's about training that muscle of listening and feeling and sensing and trusting that guidance and just going for it. So I love that you started your new company so quickly. I have
Oh, look at that.
I have Dog Dad. It's Dog Dad because I'm obsessed. I was lucky to be an early tester, so Dog Dad is actually one of my favorites because the vanilla whiskey smell.
Whiskey, a little fire, a little vanilla.
I have another one somewhere behind my computer, but they smell so good. They're so clean. And what a lot of people don't realize is lighting candles, and a lot of this, just the scent industry, like you said, is super toxic.
Mm-hmm.
And these are all clean and healthy for our pets and for us, which is just a wonderful mission.
Yep.
So how can people order from you, find you?
Thank you. I'm at dogkindcandles.com and shipping through the US now. I've not even been live for a week, and I'm already getting requests from Australia and Canada and England. So stay tuned. We'll get international soon. And then on Facebook and Instagram, I'm at dogkindco.
Okay. So you heard it from Jen herself, and then I'll also just link everything up in the show notes so that people can find you. If you're driving or something, it will be in the show notes. So Sister Jen, thank you so much. This was an incredible conversation. I feel like we could just keep going. Are there any just last minute thoughts that you have, or just wrap up thoughts that you have for people before we say goodbye?
I think just, back to your last point that you just said about, follow the nudges. And that just comes again from, like, if I could just, the thing I really want to get across is just being aware of, what those nudges are, and knowing that you can be aware. It's a choice that you make to check your thoughts, or to choose a higher thought, or to even just want to get better. I just knew I could get better, but I didn't know how, but I just knew I could. And anybody can do it. But it is the one thing that you do have to do is to make that choice to do that, and then to be aware of what works for you and what doesn't, and that all, like, it is all a practice of, just becoming more aware of the options that are out there, of the examples that are out there that we're not always raised with, and just of, like, the incredible places that every person can go, if they really want to.
Beautiful and perfect. Thank you.
Thank you,
Well
sister.
said, sister. Mucho amor. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. Sister, thank you so much for your time and for your heart today, and for offering what you offered. And I'm so excited for Dog Kind Candle. I love my candles so much. They burn every day for many, many hours, and they last a really long time, and they smell so good. So congratulations.
Thank you.
And until next time, remember to be radiant, be powerfully authentic, and know that you can reclaim your fire at any time. Take care. Hi, this is Angela Noel, and thank you so much for listening to this podcast. If you have found value in listening to this podcast, I would be so grateful if you could kindly share this podcast with those you care about. Please help me spread the word of empowerment and possibility and expansion by sharing this podcast. Or you could also leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Remember to follow me on Instagram at I am Angela Noel, or you could go to my website at www.angelanoelinternational.com to learn more about my work and to find out how you can work with me. Thank you very much.